The forest knew my name long before the wolves ever did. It whispered it on the wind that rustled the leaves of the ancient oaks, a sound that was both a welcome and a warning. I heard it every time I crossed from the human world into theirs, a boundary marked not by fences or signs, but by a sudden profound silence. The birds still sang, yes, and the creek still gurgled, but the industrial hum of the distant town vanished, replaced by a watchful quiet. I was Ilara, the archivist, the keeper of your stories, and the girl who didn't belong. Tonight, the air was thick with the scent of pine smoke and damp earth, the promise of autumn clinging to the chill. A harvest moon hung heavy and gold in the twilight sky, a luminous coin against the deepening violet. It was the night of the zenith gathering, the most sacred celebration for the Stonewood pack. From my usual hiding place, a moss-covered outcrop of rock overlooking the main clearing, I watched them. Firelight danced across faces I had studied for years, their movements a fluid, powerful ballet of belonging. They were grace and strength personified, a symphony of unity that my human heart could only observe from the wings. I shouldn't have been there. The thought was a constant humming refrain in my mind. This was for pack members only, for those whose blood carried the ancient song of the shift, who could shed their skin and run wild under the moon's gaze. Not for me. I was the orphan they'd taken in out of a duty I never fully understood, the human girl raised on the fringes of their world, given a purpose among their records, but never a place in their hearts. My fingers found the cool, familiar shape of the river stone pendant at my throat. It was smooth and dark, with a single perfect white vein running through its center like a crack of lightning. My mother had pressed it into my hand on a night much like this one, her voice a fragile thread in the dark. "Remember, Alara," she'd whispered, her breath a ghost against my cheek. "The deepest magic is not in changing your shape, but in knowing your own soul. This stone remembers the heart of the mountain. You must remember yours." I wore it always, a secret touchstone against the loneliness that was my constant companion. Below, the celebration was reaching its peak. Drums beat a rhythm that seemed to vibrate in my very bones, a primal call that stirred something restless deep within me. I saw Alpha Kale standing at the center of it all, his presence a pillar of calm authority. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and even from this distance, I could feel the weight of his gaze, the immense responsibility he carried for every soul in the clearing. Beside him, on a raised dais, stood the empty throne, the Luna's throne. It wasn't a chair of wood, but of living stone, woven through with veins of quartz that caught the firelight and seemed to hold it captive. Moss and tiny star-like white flowers grew in its crevices. It had been empty since Kale's mother, Luna Anya, had vanished 5 years ago. No one spoke of what happened to her. It was a grief so profound it had become a silent, shaping force in the pack, a shadow that lengthened with every passing season. No one ever went near it. It was a monument, a ghost, a sacred space. I was about to slip away, to retreat to the quiet safety of my archive cottage, when a voice called out, bright and clear, "Ilara, you came!" Lyra, Kale's younger sister, bounded up the rocky path toward me, her smile as radiant as the moon above. She was all vibrant energy and unwavering kindness, the only one who ever sought me out without agenda. I was just watching, I said quickly, taking a step back. I was on my way home. Nonsense. She grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. You're always hiding up here with the owls. Tonight, you're celebrating with us. You serve the pack as much as anyone. That was debatable, but protesting to Lyra was like trying to stop the river with your hands. She pulled me down into the clearing, and immediately the atmosphere shifted. The music didn't stop, but it faltered. Conversations hushed, then resumed in lower tones. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, their gazes a physical pressure. I felt my cheeks flush, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was a discordant note in their perfect harmony. Tail, look, Lyra announced, dragging me toward the Alpha. I found our archivist admiring the festivities from afar. Alpha Kale turned, and his storm-gray eyes found mine. I had only ever spoken to him a handful of times, usually when he needed some obscure historical reference from the archives. He was a man of few words, his expressions as layered and unreadable as the forest itself. Elara, he acknowledged, his voice a low rumble. Not archivist, my actual name. That alone was enough to set my nerves on edge. Alpha, I murmured, dipping my head in respect, my throat tight. Before he could say more, a sharp cry echoed from the far side of the clearing. Two young enforcers, Rydian and Finn, were squaring off, their postures rigid, a low growl rumbling from Rydian's chest. Their disagreement was a spark in dry tinder. "Excuse me," Kale said, his attention instantly diverted. He moved toward the disruption with that unnerving, silent grace they all possessed. In the commotion, Lyra was whisked away by a group of her friends, leaving me standing utterly alone at the edge of the sacred circle, the heat of the central fire warming my back. I needed to leave. Now. This was a mistake. I took a step backward, my plan to vanish into the tree line half formed, and that's when I felt it. A pull, not a physical force, but a call, a resonance that started in the pit of my stomach and spread through my limbs. It was a low, thrumming hum, like a plucked string tuned to a frequency only I could hear. I turned slowly, my breath catching in my throat. The lunas drone, the quartz veins within the stone were glowing with a soft, milky light, pulsing in time with the frantic beat of my heart. The pull was coming from there. It was an invitation, a summons. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to reject this strange magic. This was not my world. This was not my place. But my feet moved of their own volition. It was as if I were caught in a current, drifting toward a destiny I had never asked for. The pack was distracted, their focus on Kale as he de-escalated the fight. No one was watching me. It would just be for a second, I told myself. A moment's rest, a single fleeting touch to understand this strange pull, and then I would go. I stepped onto the dais. The air grew still and heavy. I reached out, my fingers hovering just above the cool stone. Then, with a final trembling breath, I sat down. The world exploded into light. A wave of pure silver energy shot up from the throne, through my body, and into the night sky. It wasn't heat or cold, but lithe, ancient, powerful, and overwhelmingly conscious. The stone, which had felt unyielding at first touch, softened and shifted, molding itself to the contours of my body as if it had been carved for me alone. The quartz veins blazed, and the tiny white flowers bloomed instantaneously, filling the air with a sweet, melancholic fragrance. A profound sense of rightness, of homecoming, washed over me, so intense it brought tears to my eyes. And then, just as quickly, it was replaced by sheer, undiluted panic. I tried to stand, to push myself up from the arms of the throne, but I couldn't. It wasn't that it was holding me down by force. It was more that the connection was so complete, so intrinsic, that the thought of breaking it felt like trying to sever my own limb. The throne had accepted me. It had claimed me. The silence that fell over the clearing was absolute. The drums had stopped. The laughter had died. Every single member of the stone wolfpack was staring at me, their faces a canvas of shock, disbelief, and burgeoning anger. The first to speak was Elder Maeve, her voice a horrified whisper that carried through the deadly quiet. By the great moon, what has she done? Alpha Kale turned from the subdued enforcers, his eyes widening as they fell upon me, ensconced in the glowing throne. His face, usually a mask of composed authority, was a storm of confusion and dawning fury. He strode toward the dais, the crowd parting before him like wheat before a scythe. "Get up!" The command was low, laced with an alpha's power that I felt vibrate in my teeth. Tears of frustration and fear welled in my eyes. "I can't," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Kale, I can't. It won't let me go." The stonewood throne, silent for 5 long years, had chosen its new Luna, and it had chosen me. The silence that followed my whispered confession was more terrifying than any roar. It was a living, breathing thing, heavy with centuries of tradition, and a shock so profound it seemed to have stolen the very air from the clearing. I was trapped, pinned not by physical chains, but by a magic I couldn't comprehend, under the horrified gaze of an entire world that saw me as a defiler. Kale took another step closer, his large frame blocking out the firelight. "Explain yourself." His voice was dangerously quiet, each word a shard of ice. "What is there to explain, Kale?" The voice belonged to Torin, the pack's lead enforcer. He moved to stand just behind his alpha, his massive arms crossed over his chest, his scarred face a mask of contempt. "The human has desecrated our most sacred relic. The law is clear." Panic clawed its way up my throat. "I didn't mean to. I felt a pull. I only meant to sit for a second." The excuses sounded pathetic even to my own ears. Elder Maeve approached slowly, her gnarled hand outstretched not toward me, but toward the throne itself. Her ancient eyes, usually clouded with memory, were sharp and clear. "The throne does not respond to whims, child. It does not react to accidents. It has been dormant, a heart without a beat, since Anya left us." She turned her piercing gaze to Kale. "If it holds her, it is by its own will." "This is absurd," Kale growled, the sound rumbling from his chest. "She is human. Try to remove her," Torin challenged, a grim smile on his lips. Kale's jaw tightened. He gave a sharp nod to Finn, the younger of the 2 enforcers, who had been fighting. Finn stepped forward, his expression a mixture of reluctance and duty. "Forgive me, Archivist," he muttered, before gripping my arms. The moment his hands closed around me, the throne reacted. A pulse of silver light erupted from the stone, a silent, powerful shockwave that threw Finn backward. He landed hard on the ground, several feet away, shaking his head as if stunned. A collective gasp rippled through the pack. No one has ever been rejected by the throne while it holds its chosen, Maeve said, her voice filled with a kind of reverent awe. The bond is absolute. Lyra pushed her way to the front of the crowd, her face pale, but her eyes determined. Kale, you see, this isn't her fault. The old magic has spoken. Magic that chooses a human? Torin spat. Impossible. This is a trick. Some human sorcery we don't understand. My fear began to curdle into a spark of anger. I was sitting here, humiliated and terrified, being discussed as if I were a bug under a glass. I have no sorcery, I said, my voice gaining strength. I have nothing but the cloves on my back and my work in the archives. Why would I want this? Power, Torin answered simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. A human as Luna of the Stonewood Pack? It is an unthinkable elevation. An unthinkable curse. I shot back, my hands gripping the stone arms of the throne. The cool, living rock beneath my palms was the only thing that felt solid in this spiraling nightmare. I don't want your power. I want to go back to my cottage and my books. Yet the throne disagrees, Maeve interjected softly. She looked from my face to Kale's. Alpha, the legends are clear. The throne chooses for a reason. It sees a need in the pack that we cannot. Kale was staring at me, his gray eyes searching mine, looking for deception, ambition, a flaw that would explain this impossibility. He found only my raw, terrified honesty. The fury in his eyes banked, replaced by a heavy, weary resolve. Council, he announced, his voice cutting through the rising babble of the crowd. Now, in the lodge. His gaze fell on me, a complex storm of emotions in their depths. Bring her. Rydian and Finn moved forward again, this time reaching for the throne itself to carry it, with me in it. But as their hands touched the stone, the same silvery pulse repelled them, forcing them to stumble back. A frustrated growl escaped Kale's lips. Can you walk with it? He asked me, the question sounding utterly surreal. Tentatively, I placed my feet on the ground and pushed. This time, the throne allowed me to stand, but the connection remained, a tangible thread of energy. When I took a hesitant step forward, the throne slid smoothly with me, as if it were an extension of my own body, weightless and obedient. A fresh wave of whispers swept through the pack. This was beyond their understanding. It was beyond mine. Follow me, Kale commanded, turning his back and striding toward the large, timber-framed lodge at the edge of the clearing. And so I walked, my legs trembling, through a gauntlet of staring eyes. The Luna's throne glided silently behind me, my bizarre and undeniable shadow. I saw hatred in some faces, confusion in others, and in a few of the younger pack members, a flicker of the same awe I'd seen in Maeve's eyes. Lyra gave me a small, encouraging nod as I passed, her faith a tiny lifeline in the storm. As we approached the lodge, a place I had never once set foot inside, I caught our reflection in a dark window. My own face, pale and frightened, framed by hair the color of winter wheat. And behind me, the majestic, glowing throne, its light casting a silver halo around me. For a moment, I didn't recognize the girl in the glass. She looked like a figure from one of the old tales, a priestess or a queen. She looked like she belonged. The illusion shattered as Cale held the heavy oak door open, his expression grim. Inside, I stepped over the threshold, the throne passing through without a sound. The doors swung shut behind the last council member, sealing me in with the most powerful wolves in the territory and the ancient, stubborn magic that had irrevocably bound my fate to theirs. The inside of the pack lodge smelled of cedar smoke, old leather, and immense concentrated power. It was an aroma that spoke of generations of alphas, of decisions that had shaped lives and territories. Tapestries depicting great hunts and legendary battles hung from the timbered walls, and a massive hearth dominated the far end of the council chamber, its fire the only source of light besides the eerie, persistent glow of the throne. The council members took their seats around a heavy, circular table made of a single slice of ancient oak. Cale stood at the head, his back to the fire, his shadow dancing on the wall behind him like a restless giant. Elder Maeve sat to his right, her hands folded calmly on the table. Torin sat to his left, his posture rigid with disapproval. The others, Orla, the sharp-eyed strategist, and Bowen, the quiet, steadfast guardian of the pack's borders, filled the remaining seats. There was no seat for me. The throne, however, settled itself a few feet behind me, its presence a silent, undeniable participant in the proceedings. "Speak," Cale commanded, his voice echoing in the tense silence. "How is this possible?" Torin was the first to break. "It isn't. The human bloodline has always been separate, weaker. The throne is of the earth, of the moon, of us. It cannot bond with one who cannot answer the call of the wild." "Yet it has," Maeve countered, her voice calm but firm. "We all witnessed it. Denying what our eyes have seen will not change the reality. The throne has not chosen a human in over 10 generations, but the precedent exists in the oldest psalms. The first Luna of the Stonewood Pack was not a shifter." Orla leaned forward, her analytical eyes scanning me as if I were a complex equation. The legends say she was a star-seer, one who could read the patterns of the moon and earth, who could guide the pack with visions. Out. All eyes turned to me. Visions? I had never had a vision in my life. The most mystical thing I'd ever experienced was the occasional strong intuition, which I'd always attributed to common sense. "My mother was a teacher," I said, my voice small in the vast room. "My father was a carpenter. I'm an archivist. I organize history. I don't see the future." "Then what possible use could the throne have for you?" Torin demanded. A spark of defiance ignited within me. "Perhaps it's tired of the same old arguments," I said, meeting his glare. "Perhaps it wanted someone who actually reads the histories instead of just repeating them." A muscle twitched in Cale's jaw. "Your insolence is not helping your situation, Ilara." "My situation is that I'm bonded to a piece of furniture against my will and being accused of scheming for a position I never wanted." The words burst out of me, fueled by all the fear and frustration of the night. "You think I enjoy this? You think I want to be the center of this circus? I just want to go home." "And where is that?" Kale's question was soft, but it struck with the force of a physical blow. I opened my mouth to say my cottage, but the words died in my throat. Was that really my home? A place granted to me out of pity on the very edge of their territory? A place I could be removed from at any moment? The throne behind me seemed to hum, a low, comforting thrum that resonated in my bones. In its own strange, terrifying way, it felt more like a home than that cottage ever had. My silence was answer enough. Elder Maeve spoke into the quiet. The throne responds to blood, Kale, to lineage. Perhaps the answer does not lie in what she is, but in who she is. Her ancient eyes fixed on the riverstone pendant that had slipped out from the collar of my shirt during my outburst. Kale's gaze followed hers. He took a slow step toward me. That pendant, where did you get it? Instinctively, my hand flew to it, closing around the smooth, cool stone. It was my mother's. She gave it to me. Your mother, Kale repeated, his voice oddly strained. The woman who died with your father in the landslide, at the edge of our territory. A cold dread trickled down my spine. Yes, the pack found me in the rubble. You took me in. The symbol, the river stone with the lightning vein, is the mark of the Starseer line. The last known Starseer, a woman named Saren, disappeared from Miss Pack 40 years ago. She was said to carry such a stone. My mother wasn't a Starseer, I whispered, but the protest sounded weak, even to me. I remembered her knowing things, little things, when a storm was coming, long before the sky darkened, where a lost pet would be found, her quiet certainty that we needed to move, to come here, to the forests near the Stonewood territory, just a year before they died. Saren was my aunt, Kale said, his voice low and heavy with a history I couldn't fathom. My father's sister. Her disappearance broke his heart. He believed she was killed by those who feared her sight. The pieces were falling into a picture I didn't want to see. My mother, a runaway starseer, hiding among humans, returning to the edge of her ancestral home for a reason she took to her grave. And me, her daughter, living among them all this time, ignorant of the blood in my veins. Torin slammed his fist on the table, making me jump. A dormant bloodline means nothing. She has shown no gift. She has lived as a human, thinks like a human. The throne bonding with her is a fluke, a malfunction brought on by her latent blood. We must perform the rite of severance. Break the bond before it corrupts our traditions further. The rite of severance has a 50% mortality rate for the one severed. Bowen spoke for the first time, his voice a deep, quiet rumble. It is a last resort, Torin, for traitors and the irredeemably corrupted. Is that what you believe the girl to be? Before Torin could answer, Kale held up a hand. Enough. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes besides anger and authority. I saw a deep, weary conflict. The truth of her blood does not change the immediate problem. The throne is bonded to her. The pack has seen it. We cannot hide this. We must decide what to do. Then decide, I said, finding my voice again. It was steadier now, grounded by a dawning understanding of my own history. But decide knowing that I am not an outsider who stumbled into your midst. I am the daughter of this pack. I have as much right to be here as any of you. And I did not ask for this. I gestured to the throne. But it chose me. And until you can find a way to undo that without killing me, you are stuck with me." The chamber fell into a stunned silence. I had never spoken to any of them with such boldness. I had always been the quiet archivist, the grateful orphan. But the throne's energy humming in my veins and the revelation of my mother's true identity had forged a new strength inside me. Kale studied me for a long, silent moment, his gray eyes unreadable. Finally, he nodded, a single curt dip of his head. "Until dawn," he declared, "Alara will remain in the lodge under guard. Maeve, you will scour the archives with her. I want every text, every scroll, every fragment of lore regarding the Starseers and the Luna's throne brought to this room. The rest of you, speak of this to no one. We reconvene at first light." It was a temporary reprieve, but as the council members filed out, leaving me alone with Maeve and the ever-present throne, I knew the real battle had only just begun. The throne had chosen me, but the pack had not, and convincing a pack of wolves to follow a human who carried an ancient, sleeping magic would be a fight for my very life. The archives had always been my sanctuary, a place of quiet order where the past was meekly preserved in ink and parchment. But tonight, as I re-entered with Elder Maeve and the softly glowing throne, it felt like a different world. The familiar scent of old paper and leather was now underscored by the electric tang of ancient magic. "The most important truths are never in the open catalogs," Maeve murmured, moving with a purpose that belied her age. She went straight to the back wall, where the oldest, most fragile maps were stored in a climate-controlled cabinet. "Your mother, Saren, she was the most gifted starseer I have ever known. Her visions were not mere glimpses, they were full-blooded truths. It was a heavy burden." I followed her, the throne sliding soundlessly over the stone floor behind me. Why did she leave? Maeve's hands, gnarled with age, traced the edge of the cabinet. She saw a schism, a terrible conflict brewing within the pack, one that would tear families apart. She believed that by removing herself, the source of so many contentious prophecies, she could avert the bloodshed. She turned to look at me, her eyes sad, and perhaps she did. But her departure created a different kind of wound, a silence where there should have been guidance. She gestured for me to come closer. The archives themselves were originally the domain of the Starseers. They built this knowledge, curated it. There are layers to this place, Alara, secrets that only reveal themselves to the right bloodline, under the right circumstances. She placed her palm flat against the seemingly solid stone wall beside the cabinet. "Place your hand here, child. Let the throne's energy flow through you. Let it speak to the memory in the stone." Hesitantly, I pressed my palm against the cool, rough surface. The moment my skin made contact, the energy from the throne surged up through my feet, a warm, silvery current that flowed up my spine and down my arm. A tingling sensation spread from my fingertips into the wall. Before my eyes, hairline cracks in the stone began to glow with the same milky light as the throne's quartz veins. They spread and connected, forming an intricate, luminous pattern, a circle encompassing a river stone with a single, jagged white vein, the exact image of my pendant. A soft, grinding sound filled the air as a section of the wall, perfectly camouflaged moments before, receded and slid sideways, revealing a hidden alcove. My breath caught. Inside, resting on a simple stone pedestal, was a small, ornately carved wooden box. It had no lock, but on its lid was inlaid the same riverstone symbol in polished jet and mother of pearl. "Open it," Maeve whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It was meant for you." With trembling hands, I lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of faded blue velvet, lay two objects. The first was a delicate silver circlet, woven to look like intertwining vines, set with a single, luminous moonstone at its center. The second was a leather-bound journal, its cover worn soft with age. Beneath them lay a sealed envelope, with a heart pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. I picked it up. My name was written on the front in an elegant, flowing script I recognized instantly. It was my mother's handwriting. "My dearest Ilara, if you are reading this, then the path I feared has opened before you. I have spent your whole life trying to shield you from this legacy, to give you a world of sunlit days, free from the weight of moon-drenched visions and the politics of wolves. Forgive me. You are the last of the Starseer line of the Stonewood Pack. Our gift is not a gentle one. It is the burden of sight, of knowing paths not yet taken, of seeing the shadows that cling to every soul. The journal contains our family's history and the techniques to awaken and control the sight that sleeps within you. The circlet will help you focus when the visions come. Trust Elder Maeve. Trust your instincts. And above all, trust the throne. It was crafted by the first Starseer Luna. It does not make mistakes. I am so sorry for the burden I place upon you. Know that I loved you more than destiny, more than Pack, more than my own life. Be brave, my darling girl. Remember who you are. With all my love, always, your mother, Saren." Tears streamed down my face, hot and unchecked, splashing onto the paper and blurring the ink. The words confirmed everything and shattered everything. My parents hadn't died in a tragic accident. They had been killed. They had been murdered because of me, because of a future I was supposed to shape. The weight of their sacrifice crushed the air from my lungs. For 15 years, I had lived with a vague, aching loss. Now it was sharpened into a specific, agonizing grief, edged with a terrifying responsibility. Maeve placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. She loved you deeply, Ilara. To face what she saw, to walk knowingly into danger for your sake, that is a love beyond measure. "I can't do this," I choked out, clutching the letter to my chest. "I'm not a seer. I'm not a leader. I'm just me." "You are Saren's daughter," Maeve said firmly, "and the throne's chosen. You are far more than just anything." She picked up the circlet. It seemed to catch the dim light of the archives and magnify it. "This is yours, when you are ready." I shook my head, backing away a step. "I'm not ready. I don't want it." A throne behind me hummed, a low, persistent note that vibrated in my bones. It felt like a reassurance and a challenge. "The path has chosen you, child," Maeve said, her voice gentle but unwavering. "You can only move forward." Just then, a shadow fell across the entrance to the archives. Kale stood there, his frame filling the doorway. His eyes took in the open alcove, the box, the circlet in Maeve's hand, and the tear-streaked letter in mine. "You found it," he said, his voice flat. "Her mother's legacy," Maeve confirmed, holding up the journal, "and confirmation of her bloodline." Kale's gaze was locked on me. And what does Saren's legacy say about the throne bonding to her daughter? I wiped the tears from my cheeks, squaring my shoulders. I would not show him any more weakness. It says the throne doesn't make mistakes. I held his gaze, the letter crumpled in my fist. It also says my parents were murdered for what she saw. Their deaths weren't an accident, Kale. They were killed by someone who feared the future she envisioned. A future that involves me. The air in the archives grew cold. Kale's expression tightened, a flicker of what might have been pain or guilt crossing his features. I knew your mother's return was fraught with risk. There were tensions in the pack at the time. My leadership was new, untested. Are you saying you knew they were in danger? The question was out before I could stop it, sharp and accusing. His eyes flashed. I am saying the pack was unstable. I offered them protection, which your father refused. He wanted no part of pack life. They chose to live on the very edge of our territory, in a human dwelling. He took a step into the room, his presence suddenly overwhelming. Do you suspect me of this murder, Ilara? I didn't know what to think. The man before me was a pillar of strength, but he had also admitted to seeing my parents as a complication. He had kept me at a distance for 15 years. How far would he go to protect his pack from a disruption? I don't know, I answered honestly. But I know my mother believed the pack was in danger from a threat it couldn't see, and now the throne has bound me to you. So it seems, Alpha Keo, that whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not, we are stuck with each other. And we need to find out who my mother was so afraid of before that darkness finds us first. The throne glowed brighter, as if in agreement. The first step into my destiny had been taken not in a moonlit clearing, but in the silent, dusty archives, surrounded by the ghosts of the cast and the terrifying, undeniable truth of my own blood. The game was afoot, and I was no longer a pawn. I was a player, and the stakes were my life and the future of the entire Stonewood pack. The silence that followed my accusation hung in the dusty air of the archives, thick and heavy as a burial shroud. Kale didn't deny it. He didn't erupt in anger. He simply stood there, a statue carved from shadow and resolve, his storm-gray eyes holding mine with Your mother saw many things, he said, his voice low and carefully controlled. She saw paths of light and paths of shadow. But a vision is not a fact. It is a possibility. The threat she feared may have died with her. Or it may have been waiting, I countered, the letter crinkling in my clenched fist. Waiting for the Starseer blood to return. The throne didn't bond with me by chance, Kale. My mother wrote that it was crafted by the first Starseer Luna. It recognizes its own, and it activated now, for a reason. Elder Maeve stepped between us, a living bridge across the chasm of mistrust. Arguing over shadows will not illuminate the path forward. The girl is right. The bonding is a catalyst. We must understand why it happened now. She held up my mother's journal. The answers, if they exist, will be in here, in Saren's own words. Kale's gaze finally broke from mine, shifting to the journal. I saw the conflict in the tight line of his jaw, the flicker of old grief in his eyes. My mother had been his aunt, a link to the father he had lost. Her disappearance had left a wound that had never fully healed. Read it, he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Both of you, I want to know every warning, every prophecy, every name she mentioned. I will double the patrols on the borders. Until we know what we are facing, we operate as if the threat is imminent. He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway, looking back at me. And Alara, the guards outside this door are for your protection. Do not test them. He was gone before I could reply, leaving Maeve and me alone again, with the humming throne and the weight of my mother's legacy. We didn't return to the council chamber. We settled right there in the archives, surrounded by the silent witnesses of history. Maeve lit an old oil lamp, its warm, flickering light pushing back the shadows as I opened the journal. The first page was dated over 40 years ago. The handwriting was my mother's, but younger, filled with a hopeful energy that made my heart ache. The sight came to me fully today, like a flower unfurling in my mind. I saw the new moon reflected in a still pond, and in its dark mirror I saw two pups playing, one with fur as dark as midnight, the other with eyes the color of a winter sky. They tumbled together, then stood side by side, their shoulders touching, as they looked out over the territory. A partnership, a balance. I believe the dark one is my brother's son, Kale. The other? I do not know her face, but I feel her importance. The future of Stonewood rests on their alliance. I read the passage aloud, my voice barely a whisper. Kale and a girl with winter sky eyes. My own eyes, a pale silvery blue, met Maeve's across the table. The vision has been fulfilled, Maeve said softly. You and Kale, standing together now. But we're not allies, I protested, a flush of heat rising to my cheeks. We're adversaries trapped in the same cage. Are you? Maeve asked, her head tilted. The throne does not seem to think so. And neither, it seems, did your mother, long before you were born. I fell silent, turning the pages. The journal was a tapestry of pack life, observations on alliances, worries about dwindling resources, fragments of visions, both mundane and profound. I read about my mother's growing fear as a faction within the pack, led by a wolf named Fenwick, began to argue for greater isolation, for purging any influence they deemed unwolf-like, including the Starseos and their often inconvenient truths. Fenwick's influence grows, one entry read. Her script more hurried, anxious. He whispers in the ears of the young and the angry. He speaks of purity, of strength, but his eyes hold only hunger for power. He sees my sight not as a gift, but as a threat to his ambition. I have seen a future where his words become a poison that divides the pack from within. I must leave. To stay is to become the spark that ignites the war I am trying to prevent. The date of that entry was just a month before her disappearance. Fenwick, I said, the name feeling foreign and dangerous on my tongue. Who was he? Maid's face grew grim. A powerful enforcer. Ambitious. He believed the pack should conquer, not coexist. He saw Saren's visions of caution and diplomacy as weakness. After she left, his faction lost momentum. Kale's father asserted his authority, and Fenwick was eventually exiled for challenging the Alpha's rule. He swore vengeance and left with a small group of followers. They were never heard from again. We assumed they died in the wilderness. Or they've been waiting, I murmured, a cold dread settling in my stomach. I kept reading, faster now, searching for more. The entries after her return were sparse, frantic. They spoke of a specific looming danger, a shadow in the mountains that was gathering strength. She wrote of whispers on the wind that were not wind, and a blight that would rot the pack from its roots if not stopped. And then, on the last page, an entry dated the day before she died. The shadow has a name. I heard it in the vision, whispered on a cold wind. They call themselves the Ashen Claw. They remember the old ways, the bloody ways. They are coming, and they are not alone. They have an ally within our own ranks. A traitor's heart beats close to the alpha. I must warn Kale tomorrow. The risk is great, but silence is now a greater danger. Protect Ilara. The throne must find her when the time is right. The moon will light her path. I looked up, my blood running cold. Ashen Claw, Fenwick's pack. And she says they have a traitor inside Stonewood. Someone close to Kale. Maeve's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. By the Great Spirit, it cannot be. The Council, Torin, Bowen, Orla. We have served together for decades. But one of them, or someone else he trusts implicitly, is working with Fenwick, I said, the pieces clicking into a terrifying picture. My mother was killed to silence her. And now that the throne has activated, now that the Starseer line is active again, I stood up abruptly, the journal falling from my lap. Clale is in danger. We have to tell him. The throne hummed in agreement, its glow intensifying. But as I took a step toward the door, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The world tilted, the solid stone floor seeming to liquefy beneath my feet. The air grew thick, and the familiar scent of the archives was replaced by the pungent smell of damp earth and rotting leaves. No, not now. A pressure built behind my eyes, a terrible familiar ache I'd had all my life, which I'd always dismissed as migraines. But this was different. This was a door being forced open in my mind. Ilara? Maeve's voice sounded distant, muffled. I stumbled, my hand shooting out to brace myself against a bookshelf. My vision swam, then dissolved into a cascade of images, sharp and vivid and utterly beyond my control. I saw the clearing under a gibbous moon not full. I saw Kale standing alone, his back to the forest. A shadow detached itself from the trees behind him. Not a wolf, a man, moving with silent, lethal intent. A blade, long and cruel, caught the moonlight. I tried to scream a warning, but no sound came out. I saw the blade rise, poised to strike down. A vision shattered as my knees gave way. Strong arms caught me before I hit the floor. It wasn't Maeve. The scent of cedar and wild air filled my senses. Kale. I was trembling violently, clinging to the rough fabric of his tunic. The horrific image of the raised blade burned onto the back of my eyelids. The clearing, I gasped, my voice raw. Under the gibbous moon. Behind you. A blade. They're going to kill you. I looked up into his face, and for the first time I saw the unshakable Alpha truly shaken. He wasn't looking at me with suspicion or anger, but with a dawning, horrified understanding. The theoretical threat was no longer theoretical. The Starseer had spoken. Kale didn't release me immediately. His grip on my arms was firm, steadying, as if he were anchoring me back to the real world. The phantom chill of the vision still clung to my skin, and the image of that gleaming blade was a brand on my mind. Explain, he commanded, his voice a low rumble in his chest. But the edge was gone, replaced by a grim urgency. It was a vision like my mother's. It just happened. I described it in halting sentences: the moon phase, the clearing, the shadowy figure, a weapon. It wasn't a wolf. It was a man. He moved like he knew exactly what he was doing. Elder Maeve had retrieved the journal and was holding it open to the last page. She warned of a traitor, Cale. Someone close to you. This vision confirms it. The assassination attempt is planned for the next gibbous moon. Cale finally released me, straightening to his full height. The shock on his face had been replaced by a cold, calculating mask. The gibbous moon is 3 nights from now. The clearing? That's where I take my solitary walks at twilight. Very few know that habit. It could be any of them. Lyra knows. My personal guards know. It could be any of them. The journal mentions the Ashen Claw, I said, finding strength in the need to convey the information. Fenwick's pack. My mother believed they have an ally here. Fenwick. Cale growled the name like a curse. I should have hunted him down and ended him when I had the chance. He began to pace the narrow aisle between the bookshelves. A caged predator. We cannot trust anyone. If we alert the wrong person, we warn the traitor. So what do? I asked, wrapping my arms around myself. The throne moved closer, its silent presence a small comfort. We set a trap, Cale said, stopping his pacing. His gray eyes met mine, and in their depths I saw a flicker of something new. Respect. But we need an advantage they don't expect. They know my strengths. They know the capabilities of every warrior in this pack. But they don't know about you. Not really. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying the Starseer has returned, he said, his voice dropping. And her first act will be to help me unmask a killer. You saw the attempt. Can you try to see more? The face of the man? The exact time? Any detail could be the difference between life and death. The pressure behind my eyes was still a dull throb. The idea of willingly inviting that terrifying, disorienting rush again made me feel sick. I don't know how. It just took me. Maeve stepped forward. The circlet, she said gently. Picking up the silver vine crown from the box, Seren wrote it would help you focus. It may give you control, allow you to seek a vision rather than be seized by one. I looked at the delicate silver band. The moonstone glowing softly in the lamplight. It represented everything I had been trying to deny. Accepting it felt like accepting the chains of this destiny. Cale's life was on the line. My mother had died for this future. Could I do any less? With a trembling hand, I took the circlet from Maeve. It was cool against my skin. I took a deep, shuddering breath and placed it on my head. The effect was instantaneous, but not what I expected. It wasn't a violent surge of power. It was a quieting. The humming energy from the throne, the frantic beat of my own heart, the whispering fears in my mind, they all softened, fading into a harmonious background hum. My senses felt sharper, yet my mind was calmer. It was like a lens had been focused, bringing a blurry world into sharp relief. Okay, I whispered, closing my eyes. How do I do this? Don't force it, Maeve advised. Think of the vision you had. Hold the details in your mind. The moon, the clearing, the blade. Ask the question. Let the sight come to you. I focused on the memory of the vision, on the chilling sight of the raised weapon. Show me, I thought, pouring my will into the request. Show me his face. At first, there was nothing, just the darkness behind my eyelids and the steadying coolness of the moonstone on my brow. Then, a flicker. The scent of damp earth returned. The image of the clearing began to form again, hazy at first, like a reflection in disturbed water. I pushed gently, guided by the focusing power of the circlet. The image sharpened. I was seeing it from the same angle. Over Kale's shoulder, the shadowy figure stepped forward out of the deep gloom of the trees. My heart slammed against my ribs as the details resolved. He was tall, broad-shouldered. He wore dark, nondescript clothing. His face was still in shadow, but as he raised the blade, a patch of moonlight fell across his hand. And there, on the back of his wrist, was a tattoo. A simple, stark design, a claw mark rendered in ash-gray ink. The ashen claw. I pushed further, trying to tilt the vision, to see the man's face. The figure turned slightly, as if hearing a sound. The moonlight caught his profile for a split second. A strong jaw. A hooked nose. The vision shattered like glass. The backlash of broken focus sending a sharp pain through my skull. I cried out, my eyes flying open as I stumbled backward. Kale was there in an instant. His arm around my waist, holding me upright. "Breathe, Ilara," he said, his voice close to my ear. "What did you see?" "The tattoo," I gasped, leaning into his support, too dizzy to care about propriety. On his wrist. A gray claw mark. It's one of Fenwick's men. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to hold on to the fleeting image of the profile. I saw his face, but only for a second. A strong jaw, a prominent, hooked nose. I don't recognize him." Kale and Maeve exchanged a look. "Rorik," they said in unison. "Who?" I asked, my head still pounding. "A member of my personal guard," Kale said, his voice dangerously quiet. Quiet. Loyal. Or so I thought. He has the jawline you describe, and the nose, and he would know my habits. The betrayal in his voice was a tangible thing, cold and sharp. "The trap is set then," Maeve said. Her face grim. "We know the when, the where, and the who." Kale nodded, his expression hardening into that of a warrior alpha. "We will be waiting for him." He looked down at me, his arms still supporting me. "You have done the pack a great service this night. Ilara, you may have just saved my life." The formal words were meant to convey gratitude, but the look in his eyes held something more complex. It was an acknowledgement. I was no longer just a problem to be solved. I was an ally, a weapon, perhaps even a partner. The throne glowed warmly behind us, its purpose fulfilled, for now. The Starseer had awakened, and her first vision had set us on a path of confrontation. The gibbous moon was coming, and with it a chance to expose the rot within the Stonewood pack. But as I looked at the grim determination on Kale's face, a new fear took root in my heart. Unmasking the traitor was only the beginning. Fenwick and his ashen claw were still out there, waiting in the shadows. And now they would know that the Starseer they thought they had silenced had a daughter, and she was very much awake. The next 2 days passed in a blur of tense preparation and suffocating secrecy. I was moved from the archives to my mother's old quarters in the Sears Tower, a circular room at the highest point of the lodge. The guards Cale posted were not just for my protection. They were to ensure I spoke to no one. The only souls who knew the full truth were Cale, Maeve, and myself. The rest of the pack saw only the aftermath of the council meeting. The human archivist, now confirmed as a starseer, kept under lock and key. The glowing throne, her constant silent companion. The rumors were a wildfire I could feel burning through the lodge, even from my isolated tower. Lyra managed to slip past the guards on the second evening, her face tight with worry. "Alara, they won't let anyone see you. What's happening? Is it because of the throne? Are they going to hurt you?" Her genuine concern was a balm on my raw nerves. "No. Lyra, it's not that. It's for protection. There's something, a threat. Cale is handling it." "A threat?" Her eyes widened. "From who? The Shadowfang Pack? The humans from the valley?" "I can't say," I said, hating the secrecy. "But you have to trust your brother, and trust me." I reached out and squeezed her hand. "And you have to be careful. Don't go wandering off alone, okay?" She searched my face, her youthful features suddenly looking much older. "This is serious." "Isn't it? More than you know," I whispered. After she left, the silence of the tower felt heavier. I spent my time studying my mother's journal, not just the ominous prophecies, but the techniques she described for controlling the sight. Meditation, grounding exercises, using specific crystals to channel energy. I practiced with the circlet, learning to open my mind just a crack, to let the stream of potential futures flow past without being swept away by it. It was exhausting, like learning to use a muscle I never knew I had. Cale visited once, under the cover of deep night. He moved with a predator's silence, appearing in my doorway so suddenly I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. "The plan is in place," he said without preamble, his voice a low murmur. "We've discreetly reassigned Rorik's patrol duties to ensure he is free at the correct time. Owen and I will be waiting in the clearing." "Just the two of you?" I asked, alarmed. "What if there are more of them?" "Bowen is the only one I am certain is not the traitor," Cale said, his expression grim. "His loyalty is to the pack itself. Above any individual. If there is a conspiracy, we cannot risk involving others." He stepped further into the room, his gaze falling on the journal open on my desk. "Any new insights?" I shook my head. "Nothing about the attack. The visions don't work on command like that. It's like trying to catch smoke." I hesitated. "Cale, be careful." He looked at me, the moonlight from the tower window carving his features in silver and shadow. The vision showed the attempt. "Alara, it did not show its success." He said it with such absolute conviction that I almost believed him. "Get some rest. Tomorrow night, this ends." But rest was impossible. The night of the gibbous moon arrived. A pale, lopsided pearl in the velvety black sky. The air was cold and still, the forest holding its breath. I stood at the tower window, my hands pressed against the cool glass, the circlet a comforting weight on my brow. The throne was beside me, its usual soft glow muted, as if it too was waiting. I tried to reach out with my newfound senses, to feel for the threads of the future unfolding in the clearing below, but everything was a tangled, nervous static. I was blind. The fate of the Alpha, and perhaps the pack, rested on the accuracy of a single, terrifying vision. The hours dragged by, each rustle of leaves, each distant hoot of an owl made me jump. I was trapped in the highest room of the tallest tower, completely useless. The helplessness was a physical ache. Then I felt it. A sharp, cold jolt like an electric shock down my spine. It was not a full vision, but a flash, a spike of adrenaline and danger that was not my own. It was followed by a wave of grim satisfaction, and then a searing, white-hot rage. Kale. The connection was brief, but unmistakable. The trap had been sprung. I didn't wait. I turned from the window and ran for the door, the throne gliding swiftly in my wake. The two guards stationed outside straightened in surprise. "My lady, you are to remain inside," one of them said, his tone firm but respectful. "The Alpha has need of me," I said, my voice ringing with an authority that didn't feel like my own. I didn't wait for their permission. I walked forward, and they instinctively fell back, their eyes wide as the throne followed me. The power of the artifact, or perhaps the newfound conviction in my tone, cleared a path. I moved through the silent sleeping lodge and out into the cold night air. I didn't run. I walked with a purpose I didn't fully understand, drawn by that fading echo of Kale's rage. I headed for the clearing. I arrived at the edge of the tree line, just as the scene was concluding. A clearing was bathed in the sickly light of the gibbous moon. Kale and Bowen stood over a figure kneeling on the ground. Rorik. His hands were bound behind his back, and a long, wicked-looking knife lay in the grass a few feet away. Even from here, I could see the ash-gray claw tattoo on his exposed wrist. Rorik's face was bruised and bleeding, his head bowed. But he wasn't defeated. He was laughing, a low, ragged sound that held no humor. Only venom. "You're too late, Kale," he spat, lifting his head. His eyes, wild and defiant, landed on me as I emerged from the trees. "And you brought the little starseer. Good. She can watch it all burn with you." "Who else, Rorik?" Kale's voice was like grinding stones. "Who is the traitor inside my council?" Rorik just laughed harder. "You think it's that simple? You think there's just one? Fenwick's influence runs deeper than you know. The pack has grown soft, weak under your rule. We remember the strength of the old ways. The Ashen Claw will purify what you have let fester." "Where is Fenwick?" Bowen growled, his foot connecting with Rorik's side. Making him grunt in pain. "He's everywhere," Rorik wheezed, his gaze varking with mine again. A cruel smile twisted his lips. "He sends a message for the Starseer. Your mother died screaming. You will too." That was it. The white-hot rage I had felt from Kale now ignited in my own chest. I stepped forward, past Bowen, until I was standing directly before the traitor. The throne moved with me, its glow flaring, casting my shadow over him. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, and I let the sight, guided by my anger and the circlet, wash over me. I didn't try to see the future. I looked into the murky. Hateful river of his past. Images flickered behind my eyes. Secret meetings in the deep woods. The exchange of messages. A face, weathered and cruel, with a jagged scar running from eyebrow to chin. Fenwick. And another face, a familiar one, seen in profile, nodding in agreement with Rorik's words. A face from the council. My breath hitched. I now knew the second traitor. I leaned down, close to Rorik's ear. My voice as cold as the grave. "He's wrong," I whispered, so only he could hear. "I won't be the one screaming, but you will tell Kale the name of your accomplice. You will tell him everything." I placed my fingertips against his sweaty temple. I didn't know what I was doing. I was acting on pure instinct, on the raw power flowing from the throne, through the circlet and into me. I pushed a single, horrifying image from my vision into his mind, his own body. Broken and abandoned in a dark, forgotten place, forgotten by Fenwick, forgotten by his cause, dying alone and unmourned. Rorik's eyes flew wide open, a strangled scream tearing from his throat. The bravado shattered, replaced by pure animal terror. "No! No, please!" "Tell him," I commanded, straightening up. He broke. The words poured out of him in a terrified torrent. "Orla! It's Orla. She handles the communications, the supplies. She's been funneling information to Fenwick for years." A silence that fell was absolute. Bowen looked stunned. Kale's face was a mask of thunderous betrayal. Orla, the cool, calculating strategist, the one who always had a plan. I took a step back, my own knees feeling weak. The rush of power receded, leaving me shaking and nauseous. I had done it. I had uncovered the rot. But as I looked at the terror in Rorik's eyes and the grim satisfaction on Kale's face, a cold dread settled in my soul. I had used my gift not just to see, but to attack, to torture. The Starseer had become a weapon, and I had just fired the first shot in a war that was now out in the open. The Ashen Claw knew I was here, and they knew what I could do. The gibbous moon hung in the sky, a silent witness. The trap had worked, but the cost I feared was only beginning to come due. The silence in the clearing was heavier than any I had ever known. It was the silence of a foundation cracking, of a truth so ugly it stole the very air. Orla. The name hung between us, a poisoned bubble that had finally burst. Kale didn't shout. He didn't roar. The betrayal was too profound for that. He simply stood there, his broad shoulders seeming to carry the weight of the entire forest. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously calm, the quiet before the storm. "Owen, take him to the root cellar. Guard him yourself. No one is to see him. No one." Bowen, his face a grim mask of duty, hauled the weeping Rorik to his feet and dragged him away into the darkness. That left Kale and me alone in the moonlit clearing, the throne a silent sentinel at my side. He turned to me, his stormy eyes searching my face. I must have looked as shaken as I felt, because some of the hardness left his expression. "What you did, how did you do that?" "I don't know," I whispered, my voice raw. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly freezing. I was angry, and I just showed him what I saw, a possible future, his future if he stayed on his path. I looked down at my hands, half expecting to see them stained. It felt cruel. "It was necessary," Kale said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You uncovered a cancer that would have killed this pack from the inside. Do not regret saving us, Ilara." He took a step closer, his gaze intense. "Orla, you are certain?" The vision was clear. I saw her face, talking with Rorik. "She's on your council. She knows everything. Your strategies, your weaknesses, the patrol schedules, which means Fenwick knows everything. Cale finished, his jaw tightening. He began to pace, a low growl rumbling in his chest. We have to move, now, before she realizes Vorik has been taken. What are you going to do? I asked, a fresh wave of fear washing over me. Confront her, he said, his voice like iron. But not here, not in the lodge. We'll do it at dawn, in the council chamber. The entire pack will see the truth. He stopped his pacing and looked at me, a new unsettling resolve in his eyes. And you will be there, the star-seer who uncovered the deception. The pack needs to see you as I am beginning to see you, not as a problem, but as our salvation. My heart hammered against my ribs. A public confrontation? Me? At the center of it? Cale, I can't. You can, he said, his voice softening just a fraction. You are Saren's daughter. You are the throne's chosen, and after tonight, you are my most trusted ally. He closed the distance between us, and for a breathtaking moment, I thought he might touch me. He didn't. He just stood there, his presence a solid, unwavering force. The pack is fractured, Alara. They are afraid and confused. They need to see strength. They need to see unity. They need to see their alpha and their star-seer standing together against the darkness. The weight of his words, of his trust, was immense. It was terrifying. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw no deception, no manipulation, only a stark, desperate need. He was right. Hiding in the tower was no longer an option. The battle was here. Okay, I breathed, the word feeling like a vow. I'll be there. Dawn arrived with a cold, gray light that did little to dispel the shadows clinging to the Stonewood territory. The pack was summoned to the clearing, their faces a mixture of sleepiness, curiosity, and unease. The air was thick with unspoken questions. Whispers of Rorik's arrest had already spread like a virus. Cale stood on the raised dais, where the Luna's throne normally resided. Today, it stood just behind him, with me seated in it. I had dressed in a simple, dark gown from my mother's wardrobe, the silver circlet cool upon my brow. I felt like an imposter, a girl playing dress-up in a tragedy. But when I sat in the throne, a calm certainty settled over me. Its energy steadied my trembling hands and quieted the frantic beat of my heart. The council members filed onto the dais. Torin, his expression as unreadable as ever. Bowen, standing stiffly, his loyalty a palpable force. Elder Maeve, her face etched with sorrowful knowledge. And Orla. She looked perfectly composed, her sharp eyes scanning the crowd, a faint, professional smile on her lips. She showed no hint of the traitor who had sold out her own people. The sight of her calm deception made my blood run cold. Cale raised his hands, and the murmuring crowd fell silent. "Pack of Stonewood," he began, his voice carrying easily through the crisp morning air. "Last night, an attempt was made on my life." A collective gasp rippled through the gathering. Shock, then anger bloomed on their faces. "A would-be assassin was one of our own," Cale continued, his words falling like stones. "Rorik, of my personal guard." Cries of denial and outrage rose from the crowd. Cale let them swell for a moment before silencing them with another gesture. He was not acting alone. Cale's gaze swept across the council members, finally landing on Orla. He was guided. He was given information. He was given access by someone in a position of great trust. Orla's smile didn't falter, but I saw the minute tightening around her eyes. "This is a grave accusation, Alpha," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "Do you have proof? Or are we to take the word of a frightened guard being coerced?" "The word of a guard," Kale said, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet. "And the sight of our starseer." All eyes turned to me. I stood up, my legs feeling strangely steady. "I saw it," I said, my voice clear and strong, carrying over the crowd without me needing to shout. "In a vision, I saw Rorik in this very clearing, under the gibbous moon, raising a blade against our Alpha. And I saw who he reported to." I turned my head, my gaze locking with Orla's. "I saw you, Orla. I saw you plotting with him. I saw you betraying this pack to Fenwick and the Ashen Claw." The silence was absolute. Orla stared at me, her composure finally cracking. A flicker of pure, undiluted hatred crossed her face before she masked it with wounded pride. "A vision?" she scoffed, turning her appeal to the crowd. "We are to condemn a loyal elder on the basis of a girl's dream? A human girl who has bewitched our sacred throne? This is madness." "It is the truth," Kale stated, his voice final. "Rorik has confessed. He named you, Orla." For a moment, she looked cornered, her eyes darting around as if seeking an escape. Then, something shifted in her. The mask of the strategist fell away, revealing the cold, ruthless fanatic beneath. Her shoulders straightened, and her lips curled into a sneer. "Truth?" she spat, her voice losing its cultured tone, becoming rough and guttural. "You speak of truth while you let this pack wither. You negotiate with humans who encroach on our land. You listen to the whispers of a dead seer's bastard child instead of embracing the strength of the wolf. Fenwick offers power. He offers purity. He will lead us back to glory, not this slow death you preside over." Her confession, ripped from her by rage and fanaticism, was more damning than any vision. The pack stared at her, their expressions shifting from shock to revulsion. "You are no Alpha," Orla snarled. "You are a caretaker of a dying world. The Ashen Claw is coming, and they will wash this territory clean." She moved with shocking speed, not toward Kale, but toward me. A small, silver throwing knife appeared in her hand, glinting in the dawn light. It was meant for my heart. Time seemed to slow. I saw the hatred in her eyes, the deadly arc of her arm. But I was connected to the throne, my senses heightened by the circlet. I saw the attack not as a blur, but as a series of movements. I didn't think. I reacted. As the knife left her fingers, I threw up my hand, not to block it, but to deflect the air around it. I poured the throne's energy, my own will to live, into a single, focused push. The knife veered off course, spinning harmlessly end over end to clatter against the stone dais. In the same instant, Kale was on her. He moved like lightning, his own rage a controlled inferno. He didn't shift, but his strength was immense. He grabbed her throwing arm, twisting it behind her back with a sickening crack. She screamed, a sound of pain and fury, collapsing to her knees. The entire clearing erupted. Wolves growled, some surging forward, others holding them back. It was chaos. Kale stood over Orla, his chest heaving, his face a stone carving of wrath and grief. "Orla of Stonewood," he boomed, his alpha voice rolling over the pack, silencing the tumult. "You are guilty of treason, and attempted murder. You are exiled from this pack, from these lands. Your name will be stricken from our histories. If you are ever seen again, you will be killed on sight." As two enforcers dragged the weeping, broken Orla away, Kale turned to face his people. The grief was plain on his face now, but so was a fierce, unyielding determination. "The threat is real," he declared. "The Ashen Claw is coming, and they have been watching us, learning from us for years, but they have made one fatal mistake." He turned and gestured to me, where I stood beside the throne, my heart still pounding from the thrown knife. They underestimated us. They thought they had killed our sight. They were wrong. He walked over to me, and in front of the entire pack he placed a hand on my shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but its meaning was profound. "The Starseer has returned, and we will not be broken. We will not be divided. We will stand together, and we will fight for Stonewood, for our home." A single voice, Lyra's, rang out from the crowd. "For Stonewood!" Then another, and another, until the clearing was filled with a roaring, unified chant that shook the very trees. For Stonewood, for Kale, for the Starseer. I stood there, amidst the roaring crowd, Kale's hand warm on my shoulder, the throne glowing at my back. The outsider was gone. In her place was Elara, the Starseer, the hope of the Stonewood pack. The war had begun, and I was no longer just a participant. I was a symbol, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that Fenwick would be coming for that symbol with everything he had. The unified roar of the pack was the most powerful sound I had ever heard. It was a living thing, a wave of loyalty and fury that washed over the dais, lifting me up and threatening to pull me under all at once. For a few fleeting moments, I wasn't Elara the orphan or Elara the archivist. I was Elara the Starseer, a part of something immense and primal. Kale's hand on my shoulder felt like an anchor, tethering me to this new, terrifying reality. But as the chanting died down and the pack began to disperse, their faces grim with purpose, the high of the moment faded, leaving a cold, hard dread in its wake. The threat was no longer a shadow in a journal or a face in a vision. It was real. Orla was gone, but her betrayal had left a wound that would fester if not treated carefully. Kale's hand fell from my shoulder, and he turned to me, the public mask of the resolute alpha giving way to the weary, calculating leader beneath. "We have work to do," he said, his voice low. "The pack is with us for now, but fear is a volatile fuel. We need a plan, a real one." He led me, along with Maeve, Bowen, and a sullen but compliant Tauren, back into the lodge to the council chamber. The atmosphere was vastly different from our last meeting. The air of suspicion was gone, replaced by a tense, focused energy. The empty seat where Orla had sat was a stark reminder of the breach in their ranks. Tauren was the first to speak, his arms crossed over his broad chest. "I will not apologize for my skepticism," he stated bluntly, his eyes on me. "But I serve the pack. You have proven your value and your bloodline. The threat is clear. What is our first move?" It was the closest I would get to an endorsement from him, and I accepted it with a nod. "Fenwick knows his spy has been uncovered," Kale said, standing before the hearth. "He will know we are preparing. He will either attack quickly before we can organize, or he will wait, hoping our vigilance wanes." "His strength is unknown," Bowen rumbled. Orla provided him with our numbers, our patrol routes, our defensive positions. He has the advantage of knowledge. Then we change what he knows, I said, the words coming out before I had fully formed the thought. All eyes turned to me. We use his expectation against him. He expects us to fortify, to pull back, to defend. So we don't. Kale's eyes narrowed with interest. Go on. We know the territory better than he does, even with Orla's information, I continued, ideas sparking in my mind like flint on steel. We know the hidden paths, the caves, the river crossings that aren't on any map. We send out small, mobile groups, not to patrol the borders, but to watch the watchers, to find his camp, to learn his numbers, his movements. A guerrilla tactic, Bowen mused, a slow smile spreading across his weathered face. It has merit. Turn his intelligence into a liability. He will be looking for our strength in the wrong places. It's risky, Torin grunted. Splitting our forces weakens our defense of the Heartland. The Heartland is not his target, I said, the certainty of the Starseer settling over me. I wasn't having a vision, but a deep, intuitive understanding was guiding my words. He doesn't want to conquer a pile of rubble. He wants to break your spirit, Kale. He wants to take the pack whole, to prove his way is superior. His primary target will be you, and the secondary target, I paused, my gaze sweeping the room, will be me. The Starseer, the symbol of the old magic he despises. The room fell silent. They all knew I was right. Then we use that too, Kale said, his voice like steel. We become the bait in our own trap. But we set the time and the place. He looked at me, and I saw the strategist in him, the mind that had kept the pack safe for years, awaken fully. Can you do it, Alara? Can you use your sight to help us find him? To see his camp, his plans? A pressure was immediate and immense. I can try, I said, my throat tight. The visions don't always show me what I want to see. They show me what I need to see. But I can try to guide them, to ask the right questions. Maeve placed a comforting hand on mine. We will help you, child. We will create a space of focus and peace. The more you use the gift, the more control you will gain. The planning session lasted for hours. We pored over maps, discussing potential ambush sites, fallback positions, and communication signals. I was no longer a passive observer. My opinions were sought, my knowledge of the territory's history and geography proving as valuable as any warrior strength. For the first time, I was truly contributing, not as a seer, but as a member of the team. Later that evening, exhausted but too wired to sleep, I found myself on the balcony of the seer's tower. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and orange. The forest below was peaceful, belying the storm that was gathering just beyond its edges. I heard the soft footfall behind me before he spoke. You were impressive today, Kale said, coming to stand beside me at the stone railing. In the clearing and in the council, you have a strategist's mind. It's just logic, I said, staring out at the darkening trees, and a lifetime of reading about other people's battles. It's more than that, he insisted. He was quiet for a moment, the silence between us comfortable now, rather than strained. I owe you an apology, Alara. For years, I saw you as a complication, a reminder of a painful past and a potential source of future conflict. I kept you at a distance because I believed it was the safest path for everyone. I was wrong. The admission startled me. I looked at him, at the strong profile etched against the twilight sky. You were doing what you thought was best for the pack. I was, he agreed. But I failed to see what was right in front of me. My aunt's daughter. A piece of my own family. He turned his head, his gray eyes capturing mine, and a woman of remarkable courage. His gaze was so intense, so full of unspoken things that my breath caught in my throat. The air between us seemed to crackle with a new, different kind of energy. It wasn't the magic of the throne or the tension of battle. It was something quieter, more profound. Hale, I didn't know what to say. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a stray strand of hair from my cheek. The touch was fleeting, but it sent a jolt of warmth through my entire body. We will get through this, Alora. Together. He didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and walked back into the tower, leaving me alone with the echo of his touch and the thunder of my own heart. I stood there for a long time, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast, dark canvas of the sky. The throne inside the room hummed softly, its energy feeling content, settled. The path ahead was still shrouded in danger and bloodshed. Fenwick was out there, a monster from the past, hungry for vengeance. But as I stood under the emerging stars, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. The throne had not just bound me to the pack, it had bound me to him. And the fragile, budding connection between us felt less like a destiny I was being forced to accept, and more like a future I was suddenly, desperately, beginning to want. A war for Stonewood was coming, but another, quieter war was being waged inside my own heart, and I was no longer sure which one I feared losing more. The days that followed were a whirlwind of grim activity. The Stonewood pack transformed from a peaceful community into an armed camp preparing for siege. The air, once filled with the sounds of children playing and the chatter of daily life, was now thick with the scent of sharpened steel and the tension of waiting. My role evolved rapidly. I was no longer sequestered in the tower. I spent my mornings in the council chamber, my afternoons training with Maeve to control my gift, and my evenings studying the territory maps until the lines blurred behind my eyelids. The mobile scout groups Bowen had suggested were dispatched, melting into the forest like ghosts. We lived on a knife's edge, waiting for their reports, waiting for a sign. The first sign came not from the scouts, but from my dreams. I was standing in a place of absolute desolation. The trees were skeletal, their bark peeled away, their branches ending in sharp, broken points. The ground was not earth, but a fine gray ash that clung to my boots. In the center of this dead circle stood a massive, ancient oak, but it was blighted, its trunk split open to reveal a hollow, blackened core. From within that darkness, a pair of amber eyes glowed, full of a hatred so ancient it felt like a physical weight. A blight that would rot the pack from its roots. My mother's words echoed in the dead air. This was the shadow she had seen. This was Fenwick's doing, or his goal. It wasn't just about conquering territory. It was about defiling it, poisoning the very land that gave the pack its strength. I woke with a gasp, the taste of ash in my mouth, the image of the blighted oak seared into my mind. The throne beside my bed was glowing with an agitated, pulsing light. It had seen the dream with me. I didn't wait for dawn. I pulled on a robe and went straight to Kale's chambers. The guards outside, now accustomed to my presence, let me pass with a respectful nod. I found him awake, standing at his own window, staring out at the sleeping territory. "I had a vision," I said without preamble, my voice still rough from sleep. He turned, his face alert and serious. "What did you see?" I described the ashen clearing, the dead trees, the blighted oak with the watching eyes. "It's a place of death, Kale, a corruption. I think it's here, somewhere in our territory. I think this is what Fenwick is bringing, this blight." Kale's expression darkened. "The Scoured Glen," he whispered, the name sounding like a curse. "It's a place to the north, near the mountain pass. It's been barren for generations. The earth is dead there. Nothing grows. It's considered cursed. We avoid it." He paced the length of the room. "If Fenwick is using it as a base, or worse, trying to spread that blight, it would explain why the scouts have found nothing. They're looking for a camp, for movement, not for a cancer in the land itself." "We need to see it," I said, a sudden fierce determination gripping me. "I need to see it. I can't guide us against it if I don't understand it." "Out of the question," Kale said immediately, his alpha tone returning. "It's too dangerous. If that is his stronghold, it will be heavily guarded." "Then send a large patrol with me," I insisted, stepping closer. "Kale, this is what I'm for. I saw this for a reason. My connection to the land, through the throne. It might be the only way to understand what we're facing. I can't do my job from inside these walls." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, seeing the same stubborn resolve that he himself possessed. He let out a frustrated breath. "Stubborn woman," he muttered, but there was no heat in it. "If we do this, we do it my way. A small, elite team. Bowen, Torin, myself, and you. We move fast and quiet. We observe only, no engagement. Is that clear?" My heart leapt, both from fear and anticipation. Yes, perfectly clear. A journey to the Scoured Glen took the better part of a day. We moved in wolf form, a decision made for speed and stealth. It was the first time I had ever seen Kale shift. The transformation was not the painful, bone-snapping process of legend, but a fluid, beautiful unfolding of power. One moment he was a man, and the next a massive midnight black wolf with intelligent storm-gray eyes. He was magnificent and terrifying. I, of course, remained in my human form, seated securely on a specially designed litter that was strapped to Bowen's powerful wolf form. It was undignified, but necessary. As we ran, the forest became a green blur, the world reduced to the rhythm of pounding paws and the rush of wind. As we drew closer to the northern pass, the change in the environment was palpable. The vibrant greens and browns of the healthy forest began to fade. The air grew colder, and the scent of pine and damp earth was replaced by a dry, acrid smell. The bird song ceased. The forest fell silent. We stopped at the edge of the tree line. Before us lay the Scoured Glen. My vision had not done it justice. It was a wound in the world. The ground was indeed covered in a fine gray ash that seemed to swallow the light. The trees were bare, white skeletons reaching for a bleak sky, and in the center stood the blighted oak, exactly as I had seen it. its split trunk a gaping maw of darkness. The sense of malevolence was so strong, it was a physical pressure, making it hard to breathe. "Dare!" Kale said in a low, human whisper, having shifted back. He pointed toward the base of the blighted oak. Movement! I squinted, my hand going instinctively to the circlet on my brow. I focused, letting its power sharpen my vision. Figures moved in the shadows of the dead tree. Wolves, but their coats were matted and dull, their eyes glowing with a sickly yellow light. They moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, and standing among them, in human form, was a man. He was tall and gaunt, his face weathered and cruel, with a jagged scar running from his eyebrow down to his chin. Fenwick. Even from this distance, I could feel his power, a cold, grasping thing that sought to drain the life from everything around him. "Show me," I thought, pushing my sight toward him, past the physical, into the web of possibilities that surrounded him. The world wavered. I saw multiple images overlapping. I saw Fenwick raising a staff made from a branch of the blighted oak, chanting words that made my ears ache. I saw the gray ash spreading from the glen, crawling through the forest like a disease, killing everything it touched. I saw Stonewood Lodge under a sky the color of blood. The pack fighting a desperate, losing battle against the ashen wolves and the spreading decay. And then I saw a different thread, a thinner, brighter one. I saw Kale and myself standing back to back in the heart of the glen, not fighting the wolves, but facing the blighted oak itself. I saw light, silver and pure, erupting from the throne, which was somehow there with us, and from my own hands, striking the heart of the darkness. I saw the oak shudder, the blackness receding, the ash dissolving into fertile earth. The vision ended, leaving me gasping, my head pounding. "What is it? What did you see?" Kale's voice was urgent in my ear. I turned to him, my eyes wide with fear and hope. "I saw two paths. One leads to our destruction. The other leads through that tree." I pointed a trembling finger at the blighted oak. "The blight isn't just here, Kale. It's a weapon, and he's learning how to wield it. But it has a heart, a source, and that source can be destroyed." Torin, who had been listening, growled low in his throat. A direct assault on that position would be suicide. We are 4 against dozens. "Not an assault," I said, the plan forming with a terrifying clarity. A strike, fast and precise. We don't fight his army. We break his weapon. I looked at Kale, my resolve hardening. The vision showed you and me, in the center of the glen. The throne was with us. We have to go back. We have to bring the fight to him. Kale stared at the blighted heart of the glen, then back at me. I saw the warrior in him calculating the odds, saw the alpha weighing the risk against the certain doom of inaction. He saw the same truth I did in my vision. There was no other way. He gave a single sharp nod. "Then we prepare. We go in 3 days' time, at the new moon. The darkest night, to fight the deepest darkness. We turned our backs on the scoured glen and began the long run home, the image of the blighted oak burning behind my eyes. We had found the enemy's heart. Now we had to find the courage to tear it out. The run back from the scoured glen was a silent, grim journey. The vibrant life of the healthy forest felt like a taunt now. a beautiful memory we were fighting to preserve. The image of that blighted oak, a festering heart in a dead land, was seared into my mind. The weight of what we had to do pressed down on me, heavier with each step that brought us closer to the lodge. Upon our return, the atmosphere in Stonewood was electric with a new, focused dread. Cale called an immediate war council, but this time it wasn't just the inner circle. He gathered his most trusted enforcers, the leaders of the scout teams, we elders who remembered the old wars. The great hall was packed, the air thick with the scent of wolf and anxiety. Cale stood before them, not on a dais, but on the same level, one warrior among many. I stood beside him, bethrown, a silent, glowing presence at my back. There were no more whispers when I entered a room. Now the pack looked to me with a desperate, hungry hope that was almost harder to bear than their suspicion. "We have found the serpent's nest," Cale announced, his voice cutting through the tension. He described the scoured glen, the ashen wolves, the palpable blight. He did not soften the truth. Fenwick is not merely building an army. He is poisoning the land itself. If we do not cut out this corruption, it will spread until there is no forest left to defend. A grim silence met his words. They understood. This was a fight for their very world. Then Cale laid out the plan. Our plan. The desperate, near-suicidal strike at the heart of the blight. "We do not have the numbers for a frontal assault," he stated, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his warriors, "so we will not give them one. Our objective is not to defeat Fenwick's army in the field. Our objective is to destroy the source of his power, the blighted oak in the center of the glen." He detailed the teams. A small primary strike force, Cale, myself, Boeing, and Torin, would go for the tree. Our mission was singular: get to the oak and destroy it by whatever means we could. Meanwhile, a larger diversionary force, led by Lyra and the other young swift wolves, would create chaos on the glen's perimeter, drawing Fenwick's forces away from the center. "It is a dangerous role," Cale said, his eyes finding his sister in the crowd. "You will be the bait. You must be fast. You must be smart. And you must not engage. Your job is to draw their eyes, then melt away." Lyra lifted her chin, her youthful face set in lines of fierce determination. "We can do it." The rest of the pack, those not in the strike or diversion teams, would form a defensive line between the scoured glen and Stonewood's heartland, a final barrier should we fail. When Cale finished, the hall was silent for a long moment. Then Torin stepped forward. The massive enforcer looked from Cale to me, his gaze lingering on the circlet on my brow. "This plan relies on magic," he said, his voice a low rumble. "On a vision. It is a gamble with all our lives." "It is," Cale agreed, not denying it. "Do you have a better one?" Torin was silent. He looked at the determined faces around him, at the grim acceptance in their eyes. Finally, he shook his head. "No, there is no better way." He turned to me, placed his fist over his heart in a formal pack salute, and declared, "The Starseer's sight is our only map through this darkness. We will follow it." His gesture was echoed throughout the hall, a wave of fists thumping against chests. A silent, powerful vow. The unity was absolute. It stole my breath. The next 2 days were a frenzy of preparation. I spent every waking moment with Maeve, pushing my abilities further than I ever had before. We didn't just practice seeing, we practiced pushing. I learned to channel the throne's energy, to feel the living pulse of the healthy forest around us, to understand the stark contrast of the death in the glen. I wasn't just a seer. I was to be a weapon, the only one that could counter the blight. The night before the attack, I found I couldn't sleep. The weight of the coming dawn was a physical stone on my chest. I slipped out of my room and made my way to the lodge's main hall, drawn to the quiet emptiness. I wasn't alone. Kale was there, standing before the cold, massive hearth, staring into the ashes of last night's fire. He wore a simple tunic and trousers, his alpha's form looking strangely vulnerable in the dim light. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, his voice soft in the stillness. "Neither could you, it seems," I replied, coming to stand beside him. He didn't look at me. "The lives of every person in this pack are in my hands tomorrow. The weight of that, it never gets easier." He finally turned his head, his gray eyes shadowed. "And now I am leading you into the heart of that darkness, the one person I should be protecting above all others." The raw honesty in his voice broke something open inside me. "You're not leading me, Kale. I'm walking beside you. This is my choice, my fight." "Why?" he asked, simple yet profound. "You could have left. After the throne bonded to you, you could have demanded release, return to the human world. Why are you still here, ready to risk everything for a pack that never fully accepted you?" I looked at him, at the strong, weary lines of his face, at the depth of responsibility in his eyes. I thought of Lyra's unwavering friendship, of Maeve's guidance, of the hopeful faces in the great hall. I thought of the feeling of the throne's energy, like a second heartbeat, connecting me to this land, to these people. And I thought of him. "Because it is my home," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You are my home." The words hung in the air between us, a truth I hadn't fully admitted to myself until this moment. Kale went utterly still. He turned to fully face me, his gaze searching my face as if seeing me for the very first time. The air crackled with the unspoken thing that had been growing between us since the moment the throne had chosen me. He reached out, his hand cupping my cheek, his thumb stroking my skin. His touch was gentle, but it sent a current of fire through my veins. "Elara," he breathed, my name a prayer on his lips. He leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. I stood my ground, my heart hammering against my ribs, my breath catching in my throat. His lips met mine. It wasn't a kiss of passion, not yet. It was a kiss of promise, a seal on a vow. It was gentle, searching, filled with all the words we hadn't said, the trust, the fear, the desperate burgeoning hope. It was a connection deeper than any magic, more binding than any throne. When he pulled away, we were both breathless. He rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. "Come back to me tomorrow," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. "Promise me you will come back to me." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my hand covering his where it still rested against my cheek. We stood like that for a long time in the silent hall, drawing strength from each other as the moon set and the darkest hour gave way to the pale light of dawn. The war for our future began at sunrise. But in that quiet moment, we had already won the first, most important battle. We had found each other. Dawn arrived not with color, but with a cold, gray pallor that suited the day. The pack gathered in the main clearing, a silent, grim assembly. There were no grand speeches, no roaring chants, only the quiet rustle of gear, the soft woof of wolves, and the weight of a shared, terrible purpose. Kale, in his powerful black wolf form, stood beside me. Bowen and Torin, also shifted, flanked us. Their size and power were a palpable comfort. Lyra, in her sleek silver-furred wolf form, nuzzled my hand briefly before trotting off to join her diversion team. Her eyes held a fear she would never voice, but also a fierce, unshakable courage. I was the only one in human form. I wore practical dark clothing, my mother's circlet firm on my brow. The Luna's throne stood nearby, but it would not be coming with us. Its energy was now part of me. I could feel its power thrumming in my veins, a reservoir I could draw upon. The physical chair would remain here, a symbol of what we were fighting for. Maeve approached me, pressing a small, smooth river stone into my palm, a smaller version of my pendant. "For focus," she said, her ancient eyes full of sorrowful pride. "The land is with you, child. Remember that." With a final sweeping look at his people, Kale gave a low, commanding bark. It was time. The diversion team moved out first, a stream of gray and brown fur slipping into the forest with breathtaking silence. We waited, counting the moments, letting them get into position. The silence was agony. Then Kale nudged my hand with his massive head. Our turn. The run to the scoured glen was a nightmare journey through a dying world. The further north we went, the more the vibrant greens and browns muted, the more the air thickened with the acrid stench of the blight. A forest song, a melody I had only recently learned to hear, faded into a desperate, silent scream. We reached the edge of the tree line. The dead expanse of the glen spread before us. The blighted oak stood in the center, a monstrous sentinel in the gloom. For now, the glen seemed quiet, too quiet. Then, a distant howl ripped through the silence. It was followed by another, and another, the sounds of chaos and challenge. Lyra's team had begun their work. Almost instantly, movement erupted from the shadows around the blighted oak. Dozens of ashen wolves, their yellow eyes glowing with malevolent light, turned and streamed toward the source of the disturbance on the glen's far edge. The center was clearing. Now, Kale didn't need to signal. We moved as one. We burst from the tree line into the open, our small group sprinting across the ashen ground. The fine gray powder clung to our legs, feeling like a million tiny dead hands trying to hold us back. The air was cold and lifeless, each breath a struggle. We were halfway to the oak when a guttural laugh echoed through the glen. Fenwick stepped out from behind the massive split trunk of the blighted oak. Tall, gaunt, scarred face twisted in a sneer, he held a staff made from a branch of the dead tree, pulsing with a sickly greenish-black energy. "I knew you would come, Kale," he called out, voice like grinding stones. So predictable, so sentimental. You could not resist a direct challenge. His eyes, burning with fanatical fire, landed on me. "And you brought the little starseer. Come to witness the end of your line?" The ashen wolves, drawn away by the diversion, now turned, realizing the true threat was in their midst. They began to close in, cutting off our retreat, forming a tightening circle around us and the oak. We were trapped. "Bowen, Torin, hold them off!" Cale commanded, shifting back to his human form and in a flash of power. "Alara, with me! The tree!" Bowen and Torin, still in massive wolf forms, turned to face the closing ring of ashen wolves, a wall of fur and fury against the tide of decay. Cale and I ran for the blighted oak. The sense of malevolence emanating from it was a physical force, a wall of hatred that made my skin crawl. The carved symbols on my circlet felt like ice against my brow. "You are too late. The blight has taken root. It cannot be undone," Fenwick shouted, raising his staff. "Everything can be undone," Cale snarled, launching himself at Fenwick. The two alphas collided with the force of a thunderclap. It was a brutal, primal fight, strength against corrupted power. Cale was faster, his movements clean and precise. But Fenwick fought with desperate, reckless fury, his staff leaving trails of sickly energy that sizzled where they touched. I ignored them. My focus was the tree, the heart of the darkness. I placed my hands against the rough, dead bark of the split trunk. A jolt of pure, concentrated evil shot up my arms, a psychic scream of hatred and despair that threatened to shatter my mind. I cried out, stumbling back. No, I closed my eyes, gripping the river stone Maeve had given me. I reached down past the pain, past the fear, to the connection I shared with the throne, with the living land of Stonewood. I remembered the sun on my skin, the scent of pine after rain, the river's rush over smooth stones. I remembered Cale's kiss, the promise in his eyes. Life, I thought, pouring every memory, every feeling of love and hope and connection into a single, focused intention. I choose life. I pushed that energy, bright and silver and fiercely alive, into the blighted oak. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a tiny silvery light sparked deep within the blackened hollow of the trunk. It was a pathetic, struggling thing against the overwhelming darkness. Fenwick saw it and laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You see, your hope is a weed in a field of fire." He slammed his staff into the ground. A wave of black energy erupted from the base of the tree, slamming into me and throwing me backward through the air. I landed hard, the breath driven from my lungs, my vision swimming. I saw Cale, momentarily distracted by my fall, take a brutal blow from Fenwick's staff that sent him to his knees. I saw Bowen and Torin, back to back, being overwhelmed by the endless tide of ashen wolves. The silvery light within the tree flickered, dying. We were losing. Despair, cold and absolute, washed over me. This was the other path from my vision, the path of destruction. No, the thought was not my own. It was the throne's. It was the land's. It was my mother's. I pushed myself up onto my elbows, my body screaming in protest. I looked at Cale, struggling to rise. I looked at the dying light in the tree. This was not how our story ended. I closed my eyes and I let go. I stopped pushing my own energy. Instead, I became a conduit. I opened myself completely to the power of the Luna's throne, to the living heart of Stonewood, to the collective hope of the pack fighting for their home. I didn't direct it. I simply allowed it to flow through me. A torrent of silver light erupted from my body. It wasn't a beam, but a wave, a tsunami of pure, cleansing magic. It washed over the ashen ground, and where it touched, the gray ash dissolved, revealing rich, dark earth beneath. It washed over the ashen wolves, and they didn't die. They simply stopped. The sickly yellow light faded from their eyes, and they collapsed, their forms shifting back to those of emaciated, confused wolves, freed from the blight's control. The wave hit the blighted oak. A tree shuddered violently. The blackness within the split trunk recoiled from the silver light, hissing like a doused flame. The silvery spark I had planted bloomed, spreading through the dead wood like lightning, following the veins of quartz that had once held life. The black bark cracked and fell away, revealing new, pale wood beneath. The split in the trunk began to knit itself together. Fenwick screamed, a sound of pure, enraged loss. The connection to his power was being severed. He raised his staff for a final, desperate strike at Kale. He never got the chance. Kale surged to his feet, his eyes blazing with the reflected silver light. He moved with the speed of the wolf and the precision of the alpha. He didn't use a weapon. His hand shot out and he grabbed the blighted staff. For a moment, the two forces warred. Fenwick's corrupted power against Kale's pure, defiant will. Then, with a roar that seemed to shake the very heavens, Kale snapped the staff in two. A shockwave of released energy threw everyone still standing to the ground. The pieces of the staff crumbled to dust in his hands. The silver light from the oak flared one last brilliant time, and then faded. The blight was gone. The scoured glen was silent, save for the moans of the freed wolves and the ragged gasps of the survivors. A blighted oak was no longer blighted. It stood whole, its bark a healthy gray, a single green leaf unfurling from one of its branches. I lay on the newly fertile earth, utterly spent, the world swimming in and out of focus. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was Kale's face, streaked with blood and ash, his eyes full of a wondrous, triumphant light as he knelt beside me and gathered me into his arms. We had won. I awoke to the feeling of soft furs and the familiar scent of cedar and healing herbs. I was in my room in the Sears Tower. Sunlight, real, golden sunlight, streamed through the window, painting dancing motes of dust in the air. For a long moment, I just lay there, listening to the sounds of the pack below, the normal, everyday sounds of life that were now a symphony of victory. A door opened quietly, and Kale stepped in. He moved with a slight stiffness, and a clean white bandage was wrapped around his torso. But his eyes were clear and bright. When he saw I was awake, a smile, genuine and unburdened, transformed his face. It was a sight so beautiful, it made my heart ache. "You're awake," he said, his voice warm with relief. He came to sit on the edge of the bed, his hand finding mine. "How do you feel?" "Tired," I admitted, my voice a hoarse croak. "But, ho!" I squeezed his hand. "The pack, Lyra, Bowen and Torin?" "All safe," he assured me. The diversion team suffered some minor injuries, but Lyra led them brilliantly. They harried the ashen wolves and retreated without a single loss. Bowen and Torin are bruised and battered, but they will heal. Their stand was legendary. He looked down at our joined hands, his thumb stroking my knuckles. "What you did, Ilara, what you unleashed, you saved us all. You healed the land." "The land saved itself," I whispered. "I was just the channel." "You were the heart," he corrected, his gaze intense. "You were the hope." He leaned forward, his expression turning solemn. "The pack is waiting. They need to see you. They need to thank the Starseer who brought the dawn. The thought of facing everyone was daunting, but the look in his eyes gave me strength. He helped me sit up and dress in a simple, clean gown. When I placed the circlet back on my brow, it felt different, lighter. It was no longer a burden, but a part of me. We walked out onto the balcony of the tower together. The clearing below was packed with the entire stone woodpack. As we appeared, a roar went up that was 10 times more powerful than the one after Orla's unmasking. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated joy and gratitude. They saw their alpha, wounded but standing strong, and they saw their Starseer, alive and well. The sight of us together, side by side, seemed to cement something in their hearts. Kale raised a hand, and the crowd slowly quieted, their faces upturned, shining with hope. "The blight is gone," Kale announced, his voice ringing with authority and pride. "The scoured glen lives again. Fenwick is defeated, his power broken." Another wave of cheers erupted. He waited for it to subside. This victory belongs to every wolf who fought, to every heart that held hope in the darkness. But it was won by a courage that did not come from tooth and claw. He turned to me, his love and pride for me shining in his eyes for all to see. It was won by the courage of the heart. It was won by our Starseer, Elara, the daughter of Saren, the Luna of my heart, the hope of Stonewood. A title hung in the air, the Luna of my heart. It was not a formal declaration, but something more profound, a promise, a claiming that came not from tradition, but from love. The pack understood. Their cheers turned into a rhythmic, joyful chant. "Elara, Luna! Elara, Luna!" Tears streamed down my face, but they were tears of joy. I looked out at the sea of faces, at Lyra beaming up at me, at Bowen and Torin nodding their gruff respect, at Maeve weeping happy tears, and I felt it. The belonging I had craved my entire life. It was here. It was mine. Later, as the celebration continued into the night, Kale and I stole a quiet moment away from the crowds, walking in the moonlit forest near the lodge. The air was clean and sweet, the forest's song restored, more beautiful than ever. He stopped and turned to me, taking both my hands in his. "I meant what I said, Elara. You are the Luna of my heart, but I would have you be my Luna in truth. Will you stand beside me? Not because a throne chose you, but because I choose you, because I love you." My breath caught. This was it, the future my mother had seen, the partnership, the balance. It was being offered to me, freely and with all his heart. I didn't hesitate. I reached up and placed my hand against his cheek, feeling the strength and the gentleness there. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and sure. "I will." He smiled, a brilliant, world-changing smile, and then he kissed me. This kiss was different from the first. It was not a promise of what might be, but a celebration of what was. It was deep and joyful and filled with a love that felt as ancient as the mountains and as new as the leaf on the healed oak. When we finally parted, the world felt new, reborn, just like the scoured glen. The past was healed, the present was perfect, and the future, for the first time, was ours to shape together. We walked back to the lodge, hand in hand, the Alpha and his Luna, ready to face whatever came next. united not by fate, but by choice, and by a love that had proven strong enough to heal a blighted land and light the darkest night. The weeks that followed our victory were a time of healing, both for the land and for the pack. The scoured glen, once a symbol of death, became a place of pilgrimage. Wolves would go there to see the healed oak, now verdant and strong, its branches reaching for the sun, as if the blight had never been. The pack spirit, once fractured by fear and suspicion, was now woven together with threads of shared triumph and fierce, newfound loyalty. My place was no longer in question. I was Alara, the Starseer, the Luna. The title felt natural now, like a cloak that had been tailored just for me. I worked alongside Kale, not as a seer giving cryptic warnings, but as a partner. My knowledge of the archives helped us restructure patrol routes and trade agreements with the few, wary human settlements in the valley. My connection to the land helped us identify areas where the forest was still fragile, where we could help it regrow. The bond between Kale and me deepened with each passing day. It was in the quiet moments, his hand finding the small of my back as we reviewed maps, the way he would seek me out at the end of a long day just to share a moment of silence on the balcony, the soft, wondering look in his eyes when he thought I wasn't watching. It was a love built on respect and shared purpose, a steady flame that warmed me from the inside out. One evening, as we walked through the twilight forest, he stopped at the edge of a clearing where the first fireflies of the season were beginning to blink in the dusky air. "It's time, he said, his voice soft. "Time for what?" I asked, leaning into his side. "To make it official," he said, turning to face me. "The pack has seen us lead. They've seen us fight. They've seen us heal. But they need a ceremony, a reaffirmation, a binding under the full moon." He took my hands. "I don't want there to be any doubt. I want every wolf in this territory to know that you are my Luna, my equal, my heart. Not because the throne chose you, but because we choose each other." My heart swelled until I thought it might burst. A binding was the most sacred ritual of the pack, the formal union of an alpha and Luna. It was a merging of spirits, a vow before the moon and the pack that was unbreakable. "Yes," I whispered, tears of joy pricking my corners of my eyes. 1,000 times yes." The news spread through Stonewood like a joyful wind. The pack threw itself into the preparations with a fervor that spoke of their own need for this celebration, this symbol of a new beginning. The lodge was decked with garlands of fresh pine and moonflowers. The air hummed with excitement. On the day of the full moon, I stood in my mother's old quarters, looking at my reflection in the polished silver mirror. Lyra and Maeve had helped me dress in a gown of moonlight white silk, simple and elegant, embroidered with tiny, shimmering stars that echoed the pattern on the silver circlet resting on my brow. I looked like a Luna. I felt like a Luna. "You look like her," Maeve said softly, her eyes misty. "Saren would be so proud." Lyra squeezed my hand. "You look like you," she corrected, her smile radiant. "You look like our Luna." When it was time, I walked out of the lodge and into the main clearing. The entire pack was gathered, their faces uplifted in the brilliant moonlight. A path had been cleared for me, leading to a dais where Kale stood waiting. He was breathtaking. He wore a dark tunic edged with silver, his alpha presence calm and powerful, but his eyes held only warmth and love as they watched me approach. The Luna's throne stood beside him, but it was empty. Tonight, I would not be sitting in it. Tonight, I would be standing beside him as an equal. I walked the path, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a profound, soaring joy. The pack was silent, the only sound the rustle of the wind in the trees and the beat of my own heart. I reached the dais and took my place beside Kale. He reached for my hands, his grip strong and sure. Elder Maeve stepped forward, her voice carrying the weight of centuries as she began the ancient vows. "Alpha Kale," she intoned, "do you pledge your strength to her strength, your heart to her heart, your spirit to her spirit? Do you vow to lead beside her, to heed her counsel, and to love her as your equal until the moon falls from the sky?" Kale's eyes never left mine. "I do," he said, his voice resonating with absolute certainty. "Luna Ilera," Maeve turned to me. "Do you pledge your sight to his vision, your heart to his heart, your spirit to his spirit? Do you vow to guide him with wisdom, to stand with him in strength, and to love him as your equal until the stars grow cold?" I looked at Kale, at the man who had gone from a distant authority to my most trusted ally, to the love of my life. "I do," I said, my voice clear and strong. "Then by the power of the moon, and the spirit of the wild, and the will of this pack," Maeve declared, "I bind you together as Alpha and Luna. Let no force of man or magic ever break this bond." As she spoke the final words, a wonderful thing happened. The Luna's throne, which had been glowing with its usual soft light, began to pulse. Then it shifted. It didn't just mold to my form as it had before. It transformed. The stone flowed and reshaped itself, growing wider, the arms broadening until it was no longer a single seat, but two seats joined as one, a throne for an Alpha and his Luna. A collective gasp of awe swept through the pack. Kale looked from the transformed throne to me, wonder in his eyes. "It seems the old magic approves," he murmured, a smile touching his lips. He led me to the throne, and we sat down together. The moment our bodies touched the stone, a wave of pure, harmonious energy flowed through us, joining us on a level deeper than any vow. I could feel his strength, his steadfastness, and I could feel him sensing my intuition, my connection to the deeper currents of the world. We were two halves of a whole, perfectly balanced. The pack erupted in cheers, the sound joyous and deafening. The celebration began in earnest, feasting, music, and dancing under the full moon. But for Kale and me, seated on our shared throne, the world narrowed to the space between us. He leaned close, his forehead resting against mine. "My Luna," he whispered, the words a vow in themselves. "My Alpha," I whispered back, feeling the echo of our promises reverberate through the night. We had faced the darkness and won. We had healed the past, and now, under the benevolent gaze of the full moon, we stepped into our future, bound together not by fate or magic, but by a love that had been written in the stars long before we were born. The story of the girl who sat in the Luna's chair by mistake was over. The story of the woman who was meant to sit there, side by side with the Alpha she loved, had just begun. The seasons turned, painting the Stonewood territory in a glorious tapestry of change. The vibrant greens of summer deepened into the fiery ambers and scarlets of autumn, and the pack thrived. The memory of the ashen claw is a fading nightmare, a story told to wide-eyed pups to remind them of the strength found in unity. Under Kale's strong leadership and my guiding sight, the pack didn't just recover, it flourished. We opened cautious dialogues with our neighbors, both human and shifter, building bridges where there had only been walls. My abilities as a star-seer continued to grow, but they were no longer a source of fear or disorientation. They were a tool, like a well-honed blade or a detailed map. Visions came to me not as violent seizures, but as gentle whispers on the edge of my consciousness, a warning of a harsh winter that allowed us to stockpile supplies, a glimpse of a lost human child that led our patrols to a swift rescue, a feeling of unease that uncovered a potential border dispute before it could escalate. I learned to dance with the currents of time, not fight them. The shared throne remained in the council chamber, a permanent symbol of our reign. We held court there together, listening to the concerns of our people, making decisions that balanced Kale's pragmatic strength with my intuitive understanding. It was a partnership in its truest sense. One crisp autumn afternoon, I was in the archives cross-referencing some old agricultural records with Maeve, when a familiar gentle pull tugged at my awareness. It was the same feeling I'd had the night I first approached the throne, but softer, more welcoming. I looked up from the parchment. Kale stood in the doorway, a soft smile on his face, eyes warm. "A moment of your time, my Luna?" "Always," I said, my heart giving its usual happy leap at the sight of him, feeling the steady rhythm of our shared destiny. He led me not to the council chamber, but outside toward the clearing where it had all begun. The harvest moon would be rising soon, a perfect golden sphere. The clearing was empty, save this. "It feels like a lifetime ago," I murmured, looking around the space where my old life had ended and my new one had begun. "For me too," Kale said, his hand finding mine. I was so focused on protecting the pack from the past, I couldn't see the future standing right in front of me. He turned to face me, his expression serious but filled with a profound love. "Alara, you have brought more to this pack and to my life than I ever thought possible. You brought us sight when we were blind. You brought us hope when we were surrounded by despair. You healed our land and you healed my heart." He reached into a small pouch at his belt and pulled out a simple, beautifully crafted silver ring. It was woven to look like intertwining vines, and set in its center was a single, perfect moonstone that seemed to hold the light of the rising moon within it. "This is not a symbol of duty or tradition," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is a promise of tomorrow and all the tomorrows after, a promise of family." His gray eyes shone. "Will you build that future with me, fully and completely?" Tears of pure, unadulterated joy streamed down my face. This was more than a binding. This was a human custom, a personal vow from his heart to mine, separate from the pack, from the magic, from everything except the love we shared. "Yes!" I breathed, my voice cracking with emotion. Yes, Kale. For all of our tomorrows, I promise to walk beside you, heart and soul intertwined. He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. As it settled into place, a wave of warmth flowed through me, a feeling of such rightness, such peace, that dwarfs even the power of the throne. This was the choice that mattered most. This was the bond that nothing could ever break. He kissed me then, under the rising harvest moon, in the clearing where our story had started. It was a kiss of promise, of joy, of a love that had been tested in fire and had emerged stronger than steel. Later, as we walked back to the lodge, hand in hand, the ring a warm, comforting weight on my finger, I felt a familiar, gentle pressure behind my eyes. It wasn't a vision of danger or conflict. It was a glimpse of a future so beautiful, it made my breath catch. I saw the lodge not as a fortress, but as a home, filled with light and laughter. I saw Kale, his hair touched with more silver, his smile lines deeper, playing with a dark-haired little girl who had his stormy eyes and a laugh like ringing bells. And I saw a younger boy with hair the color of winter wheat, sitting quietly with a river stone pendant in his hand, his gaze thoughtful and deep, seeing worlds beyond our own. The vision faded, leaving behind a sense of perfect peace that settled over my heart. Kale asked, his voice gentle, "What is it?" sensing the shift in me. I looked up at him, at the man who was my alpha, my partner, my love. I squeezed his hand, the moonstone on my finger gleaming in the twilight. "I just saw our future," I said, my heart overflowing with a happiness so complete it was almost painful. And it's more beautiful than anything I could have ever imagined. He smiled, a slow, deep smile that reached his eyes. "Then let's go and live it, my love." Oh. And as we walked into the warm, welcoming lights of our home, surrounded by the pack that was our family, I knew that every moment of loneliness, every second of fear, had been worth it. A throne had chosen me by mistake, but my heart had chosen him with perfect, unerring certainty. The story was complete. The orphan was home. The star-seer had found her star, and the Luna, loved and cherished, was finally, completely, and forever home. Did you have a favorite moment or character arc? Was it Alara's journey from outsider to Luna? The development of her powers and her bond with the throne? The slow building trust and romance between her and Kale? The suspense of the traitor within the pack? What would you most like to see in part 2? Your comments will help shape the next chapter of Alara and Kale's story. Let me know what you're dreaming of, and I'll get to work. Like, subscribe, and comment your ideas below.